Hello and welcome to my channel. You're watching What Helen Reads and I'm Helen, and today I've got another Mafia Romance Monday video for you. So today I thought I would focus on Italian mafia romances, and I've got 7 favourites to share with you that fit that category. There are 2 types of sort of Italian mafia romances that you can read, and one is just straightforward Italian mafia, but the majority of them are set in America. You know, New York, Boston and Chicago tend to be the most popular cities where these romances are set. And then there are also some Cosa Nostra romances as well, and Cosa Nostra is still Italian, but it's specifically when the families are from Sicily, so they're Sicilian mafia essentially. So there are the 2 types of mafia romances that kind of fall under the Italian category, so straightforward Italian mafia and also the Cosa Nostra, and I've got a bit of a mixture of both. Now in terms of the hierarchy for these Italian mafias, we have the boss who is in charge, so he is the head of the mafia and he's the boss, and then you get the underboss who's like second in command, usually the heir or the person that's going to be taken over if something happens to the boss. Then you have the consigliere, who is the boss's right-hand man. It's his senior advisor and usually closest friend. And then you have the capos, who basically head up each of the you know, the units, if you like. Capos are basically the sergeants, the people that are in charge of the teams below them. And then of course you have the soldiers who report into the capos, and then potentially associates, so other people that are linked to the mafia but not necessarily fighting force, and maybe they're doing some other things for this mafia as well. So that's a bit of, just a little bit of information about Italian mafias and also the hierarchy and how they work. So like I said, I've got 7 recommendations for you today, specifically for Italian mafia, if you're interested in that. The first one I'm going to talk about is Toxic by Maggie Cole, and Toxic is book 1 in the Mafia Wars New York series, and in this one we are following Dante and Bridget. Now Dante is Italian mafia, he's part of an Italian family, but Bridget, you'll know if you've read some of the other Maggie Cole Mafia Wars series, is actually Irish, so she comes from an Irish mafia family. So technically this one I've kind of classed it in with Italian mafia because Dante is obviously part of the mafia like Italian mafia family, but he ultimately, his woman is Irish. This one is actually a second chance romance, and it's set in New York, and in this one basically we know that Dante and Bridget were kind of high school sweethearts. She very much was in love with Dante, but he made some mistakes and kind of pushed Bridget away, or gave Bridget the opportunity to realise that he didn't have her best interests at heart, and she kind of left and went to live in Chicago, and that's where she ended up falling in love and marrying Shane, who we know is quite a big character in the Mafia Wars series, but is actually deceased, and quite a lot of the plot around the kind of the O'Malley family and what happened to Bridget is that after Sean dies, she moves back to be with her father in New York, and she takes her kids with her. So Bridget is a single mum, she is a widow, and she has 2 children as well, and they are kind of O'Malleys essentially, and she is, like I say, she's Irish. But of course she's now back in New York, time has passed, and Dante has always held a bit of a flame for Bridget, and now she's back in his life. He's got a new opportunity with her and he absolutely takes it. And Bridget is still very scared and concerned about what's happened to her husband and the potential danger that her children are in, and Dante very much steps in as her protector, to be there for her when she needs it, and to look after her and help. So I really like this one. If you like the Mafia War series from Maggie Cole, I absolutely recommend it. I haven't actually finished the whole of the Mafia Wars New York series, and I have picked up the Ireland series already, but I am going to be going back and finishing that series off. But this one, but Toxic, is a great start to the spin-off series for sure. So the next one I want to talk about is Machiavellian by Bella de Corte. Now, I absolutely loved this when I read it, but it was a few years ago now, and the plot is very complex, so I couldn't 100% remember what this book was about. But one of my viewers actually put a comment in one of my previous videos and suggested that I read this one because she highly recommends it and really likes Bella de Corte, and particularly this romance. And I replied to her and commented to say, yes, I've actually read it, I just couldn't 100% remember the plot, but thank you very much for bringing it to my attention again, because it reminded me that I'd read it. So I actually went back and had another flick through and sort of like refreshed my memory about what this one was about. So Machiavellian is book 1 in the Gangsters of New York series, of which there are 3 books. I read the first 2 books in this series, so the second one is called Marauder, and I read that one as well, which is also great, but from memory I think that's an Irish mafia tale, but this one is very much Italian. So in this one we have the main hero who is Capo Machiavelli and Mary Posey, and he's very much called Capo. Everyone calls him Capo. That's not actually his real name, but that's what they call him. But he's also known as Mac or Vittorio as well. He's got kind of like a number of names. And this one is an arranged marriage, or kind of a marriage of convenience, but also an age gap between these two as well. So it's set in New York, but part of it does take place in Italy. So they do go back to Italy, and we get a bit of an Italian flavour in this one, which was great. And this one, like I said, had a very complex plot and quite an extensive family tree. So I think if you're a fan of Bella de Corte, then you probably understand the family tree and how that all works, but it is quite complicated. So to start with, in the early parts of the book, there's a lot of names, a lot of families, a lot of people, and that probably if you've read some of our other books, you would know and understand. But if you start with this one, then at first it can be a little bit confusing about who everyone is. But once you get that straight in your head and you settle into the book, then it's absolutely brilliant. And essentially what's happened in this one is that Capo is the kind of the executioner for this mafia family, and he's been asked to kill Mary's family because her dad is thought to be a traitor. And this happens, you know, this is sort of like the prequel to the book, so this happens previously when Mary is just a child, and Capo is sent in to basically kill the family, and he's supposed to kill her as well. But when he gets in there and he kills her parents, he cannot bring himself to kill her. She's just a small child, couldn't possibly be, you know, any kind of threat to the mafia family, and so he decides he's going to take her, and he places her with another family to keep her safe, but everybody believes that he has in fact killed her. And of course he kind of keeps a bit of an eye on her over the years to find out you know, how she is and what she's doing. And years later she actually meets him again, and through a set of circumstances which I kind of won't spoil, she is kind of forced into this arranged marriage with him, where he basically gets her to marry him in exchange for security, and that's basically when they head off then to Italy for the wedding, and where we meet the rest of the family that we've kind of already learned a lot about. There is a lot of flashbacks in this one as well, where we go back to the past and when she's a child and what's happened to her, and then coming forward into the future. But yeah, like I say, I absolutely love this one, thought it was fantastic, and like I say, the plot in this one is quite detailed and quite complex, but it's an absolutely fantastic story, and then a fantastic love story, so I would highly recommend. Then the next one I want to recommend is Ruthless Daddy by Bianca Cole. If you have been watching any of my Mafia Romance series, I absolutely love Bianca Cole. Now, she's not everybody's cup of tea at all, because the types of men that she writes about are very, very aggressive, possessive, and don't take no for an answer. There's a lot of non-con, dub-con in her romances. a lot of spanking for punishments. So if you don't like that sort of thing and you're not into that sort of thing, then I wouldn't recommend Bianca Cole. But if you don't mind that sort of thing, or you like that sort of thing, then I think Bianca does some great kind of series overall. So Ruthless Daddy is actually book 3 in the Boston Mafia Don series, and we're following Fabio and Gia. This is kind of like a forbidden best friend's dad romance as well, because Gia is best friends with the heroine from book 1, and Fabio is her father. So the heroine from books 1, Fabio, is her father. Now Fabio in book 1 sends his daughter to marry the head of the Boston Italian Mafia, and pretty much forces her to go. And we learn in that, and she's very, very resentful and unhappy with the fact that her father has forced her to go and live in New York and cut all ties with her. And what we learn in that, though, is that her dad has done that very much for her own safety. Something has happened and she is very much in danger, and he figures that if he sends her away to be married to the head of the Italian Mafia family in Boston, she will be safe, and that's kind of what he's done. But of course, she's outraged, and so are her best friends. And so one night, Gia, her best friend, gets drunk and decides that she is going to go to Fabio's house and give him a piece of her mind about what he's done to his daughter. But of course, Fabio is not the kind of man that's going to let a young girl shout at him and point fingers at him. He doesn't take too kindly and decides that he's going to punish her in the normal way that Bianca Cole's heroes punish their women, which is by spanking them. So that's kind of what happens and how the story starts, and they kind of get themselves embroiled then in this kind of romance and relationship between them. And at first they have to keep it secret from Fabio's daughter, and then of course when it's all revealed, there is a lot of heartache and angst because she's best friends with his daughter, and you know, there's a sense of betrayal there between them, and also, you know, Fabio is a lot older than her, so it's quite a big age gap as well. What I love about this one though, it is Sicilian Mafia, and Fabio is actually living and working in Sicily. So this is one where we actually get the whole Sicilian vibe, the whole Italian vibe, and that's basically where he's at and what he's doing. So if you want a book that's actually set in Italy, then I would highly recommend that one. Then the next one I want to recommend is Bloodied Hands by Adelaide Forrest, and this was a new read for me at the start of June. So it's book 1 in the Bloodied crime syndicate family, and in this one we're following Ivory and Matteo. Now this one is set in Chicago, and Matteo and Ivory were high school sweethearts, but Matteo broke her heart. And 15 years later their paths cross again, because there is a bank robbery. Ivory is caught up in this bank robbery, but the robber, when he realises who she is, backs out of this robbery and begs her not to tell Matteo that it was him, and says, tell him, you know, I didn't lay a finger on you, and seems very, very distressed and scared. And Ivory is very confused about this, isn't sure what's going on, so she decides she's going to go to Matteo's house to get some answers about what the hell is going on. Now Matteo has been pining for Ivory for 15 years, and he very much regrets his decision to break her heart, which he did, by the way, to obviously protect her from his lifestyle. You know, he wanted to make sure that she wasn't at risk and she was kept safe, but of course now she is back in his path, and and he's now a different person, and he decides that he's done waiting. She's the only one for him, and he's absolutely going to convince her to be with him again. So I really, really like this one, and although there was a few plot holes, I thought, with the fact that they've been apart for 15 years, and the fact that the robber in the bank still knew who she was, and that she was under Matteo's protection, all of that was a little bit tenuous. But obviously it was a plot point in order to get them back together so they could have a second chance, so that Matteo could grovel and try and win her back. And ultimately, you know, Matteo is again the type of mafia hero that I thoroughly enjoy, look forward to reading about, who is dominant, possessive, aggressive, protective of his woman and is not going to take no for an answer, and is going to absolutely make sure that he wins her back. Then the next one is Broken Prince by R.G. Angel, and this is another Cosa Nostra romance. So it's seemingly set in America. I don't think we ever know the name of the town. I think it is quite close to New York, but not in New York. It's kind of outside of that, but it's kind of a Cosa Nostra Italian mafia world. And this one is actually a Beauty and the Beast retelling with a bit of an age gap between the couple as well. So in this one we're following Cassie and Luca. Now Luca is a very troubled and scarred hero. He is head of the mafia, but he's kind of taken a back seat. He's letting someone else run the show by proxy, and he's holed himself up in this kind of like, you know, old manor style house where he spends his days drinking, raging, feeling very sorry for himself because of a tragic accident that happened that he very much blames himself for. So he's this kind of like scarred, wounded hero living in isolation in this big mansion. And Cassie is desperate for a job because she has two parents that have done some horrible white collar crime, and they're now in prison for stealing lots of money from elderly people, and she cannot get a job anywhere. Her name is basically mud and she can't get a job anywhere, but she desperately needs to get a job so that she can provide for her younger brother, who has been put into foster care because you know, she isn't suitable to be a caretaker. But if she can get herself a job, prove she's on the straight and narrow, get a decent place to live, then she'll be able to get her brother back and look after him. So she takes the job that no one else wants, which is the housekeeper for Luca in this big mansion, and it's very Beauty and the Beast in that sense, where she goes up and she's a living housekeeper, but she's not allowed on the 3rd floor, which is kind of like the equivalent of the West Wing, and she is not allowed to see him or interact with him, and to very much stay out of his way. But of course, little by little, she breaks down his walls, breaks down his barriers, and they form a relationship. And he also starts to form a relationship with her brother, and through that, you know, feelings sort of develop, and things go from there. So then the next one I wanted to talk about was Run, Posy, Run by Cate C. Wells. And this is book 1 of the Underboss Insurrection series. And in this one, we are following Posy and Dario. Now, Dario is an absolute psychopath. He really is. He doesn't really have any feelings. He finds it very, very difficult to actually care about anybody. But he puts on a good show. And he has been dating Posy for a while, and Posy is actually in love with Dario. She thinks he's amazing. He treats her really, really well. She lives with him, and he has a very nice place, kind of looks after her, and you know, they are, for all intents and purposes, seemingly happy. She knows that he's not quite right. She gets a sense that he is a bit of a psychopath, but he's always been very, very polite and courteous, looks after her really well, and so she thinks everything is fine. Now, it is until somebody tries to come between them and sends Dario a video of Posy in a compromising position. Now, we learn that the video was taken some time ago, way before Posy and Dario were together, but he automatically thinks the worst, and basically is so enraged, he gives Posy an ultimatum. She needs to run for her life and never return. If he ever sees her again, he will kill her. So hence the title, Run Posy Run. She literally has to pack up there and then and get out and go. Of course, it doesn't take him very long to realise that he's actually been set up, that this video has not been taken recently, and in fact Posy herself was a victim of this filming and kind of like what content is on this video, and then he decides that he's gonna get Posy back. But of course, by this time she is absolutely petrified of him, completely horrified and scared, and you know, when he starts to try and track her down, it's even more horrific for her. But eventually he catches up with her, takes her back to his place, and pretty much forces her to take him back, and in doing so, Dario takes much more interest in her than he's ever taken before, and starts to realise that maybe he does have feelings for her and that she's much more interested in that than he originally thought. And that also he learned that he can't actually live without her and needs to be with her. So it's a fascinating book, absolutely love it. And would highly recommend. So then the last one I wanted to mention, which is an Italian romance, is probably an absolute classic, Bound by Honour by Cora Reilly. This is part of the Born in Blood Mafia Chronicles. It's book 1, and in this one we're following Aria, who is from an Italian family in Chicago, and Luca, who is the head of the Italian Mafia in New York, and they're very much placed into an arranged marriage with each other. And in fact, Luca and Aria have known they're going to be married for a couple of years before Aria is even of age, and she knows that as soon as her 18th birthday comes, she will be forced to marry Luca. Now she is absolutely petrified and scared because Luca does not have a very good reputation. He is known as the Vice, and she's very concerned about how he's going to treat her as a female in the Italian family. But she's been brought up and very much trained to fill this role as the wife of somebody who is head of a mafia family, and she goes into it with her chin up, and is absolutely not going to be backing down from this. What I really liked about this one is it's not just, you know, the hero has an Italian surname and he happens to be head of the Italian Mafia. This one is much more traditional, so there's much more traditional customs around this one. So if you're really interested in, you know, the Italian sort of mafia, like culture and the structure and the hierarchy and how it is, this is probably one of the more traditional ones. And one of the traditions in this is that the bride has to be a virgin, and then the night of the wedding, when they consummate the marriage, they have to prove that the bride was pure, because obviously she'll be a virgin, and when they have sex there'll be blood on the sheets and they show the blood the following morning. Now Aria is absolutely petrified of Luca, but Luca is not the type of man who's going to force himself on her, and he is absolutely, even though you think he's going to be horrible and mean and very, you know, sort of aggressive and possessive towards her, he absolutely ends up being sweet and charming and caring in his own way. I mean, it's not like he's a good guy, because he isn't, but he doesn't want to take Aria against her will, and so basically they fake blood on the sheets to protect her honour, and because Luca absolutely wants to make sure that when they finally consummate their marriage, Aria is doing it because she absolutely wants to and is attracted to him and wants to be with him. So I absolutely love that element of the story, and I really like Luca as a mafia hero. So there you have it. It was a whistle-stop tour of Italian Mafia romances and some of my favourites in that category. I want to say thank you very much for watching. If you made it this far, please give me a thumbs up. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you want to see more content from me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you and bye. So there you have it. It was sort of like a very quick whistle-stop tour of my of the Italian Mafia genre. Yeah, things go from there. Leave it there. So highly recommend.